Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. He's like a lifeline. If you're a parent, he's a lifeline. As many times we don't know how to deal with certain situations when it comes to our kids. And he does in many regards. As a longtime school psychologist in California, he's also been a valuable resource for a lot of people looking to get into that field. And it's so great to have him back with us. Good Advice Helps with Dr. Allan Gold back on the program. How are you doing today?
Okay, thank you. I'm fine. How are you?
Fantastic. And you really do resonate. They're telling me we also have some emails, which we can get to in just a moment. One thing we do here, we call it golden tools. And these are just little pieces of information, little thoughts that you can use to better your relationship with your children or just pilot them forward a little bit more. And I figure we usually end with it. So let's flip it around. We're going to start with that today. What do you have for us? What golden tool can you share with us?
Well, this is a tool not just for parents, but particularly for educational staff members. And I like to call it cultural awareness and understanding cultural differences. Now, most educators, not all, and less at this point, are, white people. And there are many kids now, always had African American kids, but there are Asian kids, there are Hispanic kids from all over the world, in spite of what's going on around immigration. But it's not every family and every culture looks at mental health in the same way. And I think it's really important for school staff to be able to investigate, study, what are the cultural differences around mental health, and parenting. And the better that staff members can make a connection with parents. For instance, if the school psychologist or the teacher administrator really thinks therapy is important for a child of a different culture, ask the parents, how do you feel in your culture about having mental health support? Because some cultures are very much more private about those kind of things, and they feel that, it's the parent's job to handle this. But, so you can't force somebody into that. But I think making that kind of connection and to try to understand what is appropriate or what's common or what's characteristic in that culture about supporting kids. Maybe some cultures don't even want tutors. They may feel very differently about discipline, letting kids just do what they want to do. Or they may be very, very strong about discipline, the exact opposite. We know that we've called some Chinese parents tiger moms. They're very, very careful about what they let their kids do. And if that is having a negative effect on the kid, how can we convey that in a very respectful and understanding way? So this is more it's both for parents. I mean, if the parents of a cultural different background can explain to staff what their values are, so that staff is better able to find a compromise, some intervention that might be helpful and acceptable to the other culture, that would be great. So I think it's a message both for parents, not just to be rigid about not explaining their values and their cultural system to teachers, but also and school psychologists and administrators, but also for the school staff to be able to make that connection, ask those respectful questions. I'm trying to understand how you and your culture deal with this kind of a situation so that we can work together, that kind of thing.
These are things that we don't consider. And even something like using a tutor or some of the normal protocols within a school to support students, that may go against some cultural beliefs and backgrounds. This is all new territory. I've never heard of that, never considered that. And I'm sure there's many more layers of that come along with the territory of as a school psychologist.
Sure.
Wow. Do you have any suggestions on how to navigate that? If you're a parent and you are concerned about how the school is going to deal with your beliefs, your cultural background, should you be proactive and just reach out to the school and just say, hey, I just want to let you guys know this is what we do, so there's no embarrassment later for the student?
Yeah, I think that's as I've said many times, the importance of communication is so critical. So if the parents can proactively put themselves out there and say, we're part of this culture, this is our history, this is our ethics, our practice, and this is not how we want our kid treated.
Sure.
That kind of thing. And certainly in, kids of different cultures are very vulnerable to being bullied or teased or criticized, not accepted, whether it's their language or their dress or their, whatever it is. I think for, both parents and, we're a team. Parents and schools have to be a team. And in order to be an effective team, you really have to understand the other, all the values that are operating in all the people that are part of the team. So, yeah, I agree with you that if parents were able to communicate, now sometimes that's very hard for them. That things are much more private. I mean, even if you look back at our own ancestors, people didn't, people who were born in the early 1900s or even the middle 1900s, well, I won't say middle 1900s, but born in the aughts or the 10s or the 20s, they didn't talk about mental health at all.
Oh, yeah.
And this could be white people. This was white people.
Oh, it was taboo back then. You didn't even, 20, 30 years ago, just say the words mental health in any situation, and people would look at you like, somebody's got a little something going on there. I want to jump to a call that we have here. Hi, can you hear us?
Hi. Hi, Dr. Gold. Hi, Steve. It's Donna again. I spoke to you last week.
Donna,
yes, hello.
How are you? Welcome back to the show. Now, I believe that you have an update on your son who's 13, right?
Yes, that's what we were talking about, absolutely, and I have great news. We immediately contacted the school. The two counselors got on a group call and immediately called me back, and they found out, they brought my son in, and they found out that he was being bullied by two boys that were threatening him. And he was afraid to say something, fearing it would get worse. So we've been working with we went in the following day after that. And we went in and spoke to the school psychologist, and the school has contacted the parents of the two boys, after interviewing them and a couple of other students, and they were reprimanded by the school, and I believe their parents are cooperating fully as well.
Wow.
So it's they had no idea that their kids were doing this, is from what I understand. And this past weekend, my son, he was almost like a different person. I think it's because we took a step, and he was afraid to say anything, but because the counselors and the psychologist stepped up to help him, I think it totally changed his attitude. He had a friend over on Saturday, and even though they were playing video games, they after dinner they went out to see a movie, and he was just like he was good again, and it was wonderful. I'm so glad that we contacted the school about this.
Well, I'm so delighted to hear that.
Wow.
So we're gonna take him to see a private psychologist, just for him to talk, because we learned that by talking to his counselors and the psychologist really helped him.
If I remember correctly, you had told us that your son was struggling with school, his attitude, and if I remember correctly, that his grades weren't the greatest, and he had also gone to detention not once but twice in
Right.
1 month, right?
Yes, you have a great memory. That's exactly it. Yep. And we've just seen, in just a couple of days, Doctor, we've seen such a transition in him, because I do believe that talking about it and getting the right help and going to an adult in this situation was the best thing that he could have done. And the way they handled it was so wonderful.
Great.
You know?
That's such good news. I'm so glad that we were able to talk about your son last week, and
Absolutely.
I hope that was help to you to, motivate you to contact the school.
Yes,
So-
absolutely. And I just want to say to the parents, don't ever give up. Even if it's the slightest behavioral change in your child, it has to be addressed, and I'm glad that we did. I'm glad we took a step to do that before it got any worse,
Yeah.
And
One thing that I would recommend you talk to the outside therapist about is work on your son's self-esteem, because that's critical. That will last through his life. And when kids are bullied, often they will think, "What's the matter with me? Why am I being bullied?" And even if it's completely wrong, and it's somebody else's fault, and they're doing that for their own particular reasons. But I think to work on just building self-esteem, so that when something negative happens, whether it's he makes a mistake himself, or somebody outside says something negative about him, or he's ignored by a friend, it doesn't really matter. We go through life having to deal with life's challenges. And if we have a reasonably strong self-esteem, we can recognize, well, I'm resilient. I can get through that difficult situation. It may not be the perfect solution, but I'm not a bad person. These are really good things about me. And I have these strengths and skills and personal characteristics. And that can really be a savior of oneself. So that's a strong recommendation on my part.
Yep, absolutely. As I mean, back in the day, and I don't have anything against these kids. Whatever. I know their parents will deal with it. They were reprimanded by the school, and I'm confident that their parents will take care of it. But back in the day, I used to think that was just kids being kids. But so it's so important not to ignore things like this, especially when, it affects relationships and grades and things like that.
Yeah. And different today, social media, texting. So there's so much more, even when it comes to bullying, that the pressure can be on today's students. But on the flip side of that, I guess, fortunately, you have a record of that. You can call it up.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Well, Donna, thank you so much for reaching out. Glad everything is working out in a positive way.
Yes,
and
I'm so pleased.
appreciate you.
It definitely is. Thank you so much. And thank you again. I hope you both have a great day.
You too. All right,
Thanks.
thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Wow, happy ending, I think.
That was good news. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm kind of echoing again.
I don't know why that's doing that. We'll have to check with our tech staff. You don't hear it now, though, right?
Not right now. No. Yes, I do. It's soft in the background. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll check that. Now, Donna mentioned that her son is going now to a private psychologist. Would you recommend that, on a regular basis, that parents, when they're having some challenges, take it to that level?
It really depends. If it looks like there's depression, anxiety, very low self-esteem, anything physical going on. I'm not talking about physical bullying if the kid's sick. If there's any family crises, divorce, an ill parent, a sibling that is a special needs sibling. something that's not going to get resolved quickly. Now, I'm hoping, like for Donna's son, because it was dealt with, and the he admitted that he was being bullied, and the other two kids were um, uh, identified and disciplined. Maybe he doesn't need a lot of therapy. I'm never against it because I think everybody can use it, and even if it sets a um, not a role model, but if somebody as a kid meets with a therapist and it's helpful to them, it can set a sort of a pattern in the future. Maybe they're 25 years old and something's going wrong. They say, boy, when I was 13, I had a therapist and it was really helpful to me, so I need to do that again. Because I think if children are have mental health destigmatized, then it makes it much easier for them to seek mental help when they get older and reach a situation that's very problematic.
Mm.
If kids or people go through life without any mental health support, it often has to get really, really bad, or it needs to be recommended by relatives or friends. You really need some therapy. Your situation is very troubling to me, that kind of thing. If it's obvious behavior or emotional um, decline or challenge. But I think setting that up for kids, they may, Donna's son may not need to go to this therapist for more than several weeks or something like that. And then obviously the change already has occurred, and that's good, which says that he can be resilient and he can make changes.
Sure.
But for other kids, I, I would never say no to that.
Mm.
Um, but just to be sort of conservative about it, finding a way to judge things are not getting better. We've tried a number of different interventions in school and at home, and nothing seems to be making my son or daughter better. That's when therapy really
Mm.
outside therapy should be pursued.
Now, I never like to use these words because they sound negative, but it sounds like if you're going to get outside therapy for your child, it can't hurt. I know those words sound negative, but I don't see a bad side of that in having your child talk to somebody.
No, no, there's not.
Makes sense.
There's not.
Why not?
Because it may be a child that doesn't like to talk, and that's the biggest challenge. I've told you before that among the biggest challenges in my job were when kids didn't want to talk. Fortunately, that was very rare.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but you can spending more time with the therapist. Often kids who don't talk, what they do is play therapy. So they'll do everything from play in a sandbox to, play games. And hopefully that builds the trust and the comfort that the child can
Mm.
actually start talking.
And I've heard a
But
lot
it
recently
sounds,
about play therapy, Dr. Gold. Like
yeah,
it's a big thing, even adults. I've heard I spoke with a
yeah,
play
right.
therapist, even yes, it's for kids, teens. But they even expressed to me that they've had adults in and, messed around with the sand table, made some kind of design, and then asked, all right, what's coming up for you there within that? We have a few minutes left.
Right.
I want to go to an email that we got.
Sure.
This is by way of instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com. Crown Point, Indiana is Dawn, who says, my daughter is 8 and very close with my mother, who is going to be placed in hospice sometime soon.
Oh,
I'm not sure how to navigate this for my daughter. She's been emotional and almost in denial. Do you have any suggestions?
okay. That's a challenge. The fact that her daughter is 8 doesn't mean that she won't be able to understand what's going on.
Hmm.
Um, so I think what she needs to do is, in sort of 8-year-old language, explain why grandma is going to hospice. Um, a parent never wants to talk about death with a child, but she can at least talk about why grandma's going there. Grandma can't take care of herself anymore. Um, and I think again, being honest with the child is is important. When people get very old, sometimes they get sick and things happen to them so that they need care. This is just a normal thing, and it's very, very hard for their children or grandchildren to accept that and recognize it. But what we want to do as her daughter and granddaughter, we want to make grandma's time that she is still alive as happy as possible.
Mm.
Uh, I think that's so important. We're going to go visit grandma. What do you like to talk about with grandma? We don't know if she has Alzheimer's or a physical um, disease, and I think it's possible to tell the daughter that. Um, grandma is kind of losing her memory, and she may not even recognize you, but that's not because of you. It's because what happens to the brain with this disease. I don't think it's particularly wrong to tell a kid what diseases there are and but you don't want to scare the kid, and that's the horrible balance. You're very young now, you don't have to worry about this for a long, long time. But I think finding ways, working with the daughter, let's bring grandma something that she really likes to eat, or
Hmm.
why don't you make a drawing for grandma, or if you like to tell a story, or do you have some happy memories of grandma? Um, any of those things. Do you know any music that grandma likes? We can bring some music for her. Um, you know, uh, I don't know if they allow pets. Maybe grandma likes your doggy or something like that. So I think to try to balance the positive actions with the negative information is very important. I mean, like a nurse told me that I had polio. I didn't believe it, but I was 8 years old too.
Wow.
You know, they didn't try to hide that. Fortunately, I was young enough not to panic about it. Um, but so we don't want this little girl, and the mom knows how afraid the girl might be. So she may want to limit saying why grandma is in hospice. Um, usually hospice rules are you're going to pass away within 6 months. Um, so sh mom will have to figure out, is it better that my daughter is totally surprised when grandma passes away, or do we want to give her, uh, a chance to build up? So, and I think I would opt for the truth, um, because that gives the child some time to understand and to grieve, but
Mm.
also to be supportive of grandma. So she could say, people go in hospice when they don't have too much longer to live. Um, I mean, she could say 6 months, but it isn't always 6 months, but that's the rule. So we have to make grandma's um, last 6 months or however long it is as happy as possible. We want her to, because she loves you and you love her, and we want to communicate that. And you have that ability to do that. And if if you do, that will make the end of her life worth living.
Mm. Such
But
a
it's tough.
It is, yes, and you want the best for your child. You also want them to have as much time, quality time as possible with the loved one.
Right.
And I'm thinking even back to what we said before about therapy. It sounds like it might even be reasonable to have an outside therapist with your child at that point too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I mentioned, if there's a family member that's sick and dying, kids may need that.
Yeah.
Or maybe often what happens is that after the person passes away, then do the therapy
Yes.
to help the child with grief and loss. And I used to tell kids, or I'd ask kids if they'd lost a family member, what did you like most about your grandpa? And the kid would say, oh, he was really funny. He told wonderful jokes. And I said, well, you can preserve his life by doing some of the same things. If you like to make jokes, whenever you do that, you can think, I'm doing what Grandpa did.
I love that. Alan, I love that. That's like, and in the case of Dawn's 8-year-old daughter, let's say Grandma loved to cook. Well, you know what? And when the time is right, in memory of her, why don't we make that apple pie that she always used to make? And share it with the family.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I mean, at Thanksgiving, I always make my mother's pumpkin chiffon pie, and it always reminds me of my mother.
Mm-hmm. That's special. Thank you for that suggestion and everything today. Good stuff. Happy ending with Donna and her family. And as always, appreciate you and what you do. Instant feedback, steve@gmail.com if you want to reach out to us, and we'll talk soon. Thanks again.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.